Justin here. Leap to the Past, volume, I can't even do it with one hand, 8. This is the 8th one, I believe. Thank you for joining me again, or for the first time if you're new. Today I want to take a request, a viewer request. My buddy Sam Blair, who's always been a very kind, very supportive guy, wanted to hear about the process of writing my novels. I'll stick to the first one just because I only want to keep this under 10 minutes. So I wrote a couple novels. The first one is called Still Man Fights. You can go on Amazon, look up my name, look up Still Man Fights, either or, and it'll come up. You can buy it on Kindle, you can buy it paperback. But yeah, so I think a lot of creative types, or even people who wouldn't consider themselves creative types, get stuff stuck in their head, and every once in a while it comes out, and you kind of take the idea out and you play with it and you put it back in your head. Well, for me, I had this story in my head, and the main premise was a guy, an older guy, who the way he fought was to stay perfectly still until the very last second, and then he would kind of react and make the perfect moves to counter what was coming at him. I thought that's cool, and then I thought, well, what if he had a baby? If he had a little baby in one hand while he was fighting, wow, that would make things difficult for him. So I explored that idea a little bit, and then I thought, well, he needs a good antagonist, a good bad guy. Somebody who could teleport would probably have a lot of luck against a guy who stays still. How would my main character react to that? So I came up with a protagonist. Originally it was going to be an older guy. It turned into a kid, even though he has a father who's kind of a bad guy too. And ironically, the father, his name is Patron, and I forgot, like you take in so much things and you kind of absorb them through your life, and sometimes you forget where they come from. So I came up with this, the father of the antagonist, his name is Patron Muerta, and he's like, you know, a Latino type. And I forgot that Steve Perry, my favorite author, who was also kind enough to give a positive quotation for me to put on the book cover, back cover, he also, in one of his many books that I've read, because he's awesome, Steve Perry, not the Journey guy, he's also a martial artist and a hell of a writer and a super nice guy. He had a Patron in one of his stories, and I didn't remember it until like after the fact. And Steve had read my book and not even mentioned anything about it because he's that cool of a guy. But I was working at THQ, I was working on the WWE games, and I started compiling. I'd write the random scene, and I would like make a lot of Excel sheets, a lot of outlines and things. And it wasn't why I quit THQ, but it was a reason. It was a reason why, not the reason why I quit THQ. But I wanted to devote myself to see where this book could go if I spent my whole time on it. So I was spending, you know, realistically 4 or 5 hours a day in front of my computer trying to bang out, let's say, 1,500 words a day. And yeah, so I got to know my main character really well, Idle, and the baby that I talked about is a big part of the story. And LJ, Little Julio, the young antagonist, who is based on the way that every boy is kind of a devil and an angel at the same time. He had elements of that, so it's neat to see what people thought of him. But what I did really, I would have all these ideas, but then I would just kind of throw situations at Idle and see what he did. And it was almost like I was reporting. Now I have a background as a journalism in video games, but a journalist nonetheless. And I would throw Idle into these situations and see what he did. You know, like with the kid. Well, now he's fighting with somebody has these crazy weapons that I invented called the Answer. And you know, now he's got a kid, and now there's 2 guys with those weapons, and they're really in sync. What's he gonna do? And I originally kind of set it in not a cyberpunk way, but like something that's a little bit influenced by Steve Perry's Matador series, so kind of future but not super future, or maybe Deus Ex, which is my favorite video game ever. And it was made by Harvey Smith and Warren Spector, 2 guys I really have followed career-wise in video games. and got to meet and interview and stuff, and they're both great. But then I decided to go with like a Space Australia theme. So like Australia, it is said, was where like England ditched its bad guys. It said like, we don't want you anymore. You go on this island, and whatever happens happens. Well, New Home in my book, in Still Man Fights, and the sequel, The Siblings Who Shook the World, New Home is a place where they threw a ship took 50,000 of like Earth's worst, and again they didn't really care what happened to them. They did have those 50,000 ended up surviving and thriving on this planet, but it's like kind of primitive, kind of dangerous. So it makes Idol stand out as a good guy, but because he was such a paragon of virtue in a way, I thought, well, what if he's a bad dad? What if he's a crappy dad? I don't know how I would be as a dad. What if he's just good at going to places, rescuing the people, and then leaving? But when he has something that he has to take responsibility for on a daily, if not hourly basis, what if he falters at that? I thought that would be an interesting thing to do. So I wrote it, and I'd written 3 WWE video games, the storylines for those, but that was characters that I knew, that was stories that had to be approved by WWE and our Japanese developer and my bosses at THQ. So, and they weren't my creations, this was a world that I made. These characters were my inventions. Even though, like I said, you absorb a lot and then you put it into your work. So like, one thing I noticed was I always try to come up with kind of interesting names. And I would take the names of people that I know, and they wouldn't be in the book, but like a buddy of mine, Eric Cannon, is a pro wrestler. There's a man in the book whose name is Eric, Arik. I have a cousin, Bonnie. There's a character named Bonnie. There's a character named Kiefer, who's named after my boss at GameSpy, John Kiefer. A baby named Chell. I have a friend named Chell Vistad, a cool DJ and used to do PR stuff when I was a journalist. So those people are in no way based on the people that I know. It's more like their names. It's an homage, even though they're nothing like them. It's just kind of to show that like, hey, I was thinking of you, and I used your name. I hope people think that that's nice. Yeah, I hope so. I don't think that I've ever been in a story. So I made one, and I made a second one. And the second one I tried to make a little bit tighter. I tried to take out some of the graphic violence, try to make it a little bit more young adult friendly. And I like them both. It was, I gave myself enough time between editing passes, or even when I wrote like, let's say half of the first draft, to kind of forget about it a little bit and then come back to it with fresh eyes. And I think that's an important thing to do. So if you're looking to write a story yourself, I encourage you to do it. Let it go, man. I'm somebody who I do a lot of editing on the fly just because of my journalist background, but like they say to just spew out that first draft and not care about quality and just get it done. So everybody writes different, and that's kind of fun. Just to think of how we all have our different process. So yeah, you can go to Amazon and look me up, Justin Leeper. I have a little author page there. You can check out the books that I have. I think you can download samples or whatever to see if they're your kind of thing. And Steve Perry is definitely an author worth checking out. He wrote the Matador series and Star Wars Shadows of the Empire and lots of other great stuff. And he's a heck of a guy, so he's worth supporting. And thank you for supporting me by watching this new episode of Justin's Leap to the Past. I'm in a kind of half suit because I had an audition today. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop this here. Thanks for watching, and I will get back to you again with another Justin's Leap to the Past.